Hello and welcome back to the Red Zone, viewers. Prepare yourselves, because in this episode, we're actually going to tackle the controversial subject of feminism in gaming. I've noticed lately that a lot of people seem to spend large chunks of time online arguing about whether or not certain games are feminist or misogynist. But what if they were a little bit of both? You know, in an industry so well known for objectifying women, and at a time when people are just clamoring for better representation and more diversity of women in gaming, surely there must be some crossover, right? So today, we're going to try to answer one simple question. Can a game contain elements of feminism while simultaneously objectifying women? Now, as a man, I obviously lack the proper perspective from which to answer this question. Plus, I consider myself more of an egalitarian than a feminist. Luckily, my wife Jessica has a female perspective, considers herself a feminist, and was kind enough to edit this episode for me. Now look, I could never have made this episode without her help, but it's important to remember that the views expressed here are still just opinions. And with that said, let's get to it. With that said, we're going to take an anecdotal approach by comparing the way female characters are treated in two specific games, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse and Bayonetta 2, both of which feature female leads. You can watch my recent Let's Plays of these two games by following the annotations on screen or the links in the description, but for those of you in a hurry, I'll give you a brief summary of both games. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse was developed by WayForward as the third game in the Shantae series and released on multiple platforms in December of 2014. The 2D action platformer spans 8 replayable levels featuring different bosses and power-ups, some of which can be used to access new or hidden areas while revisiting previous levels. Bayonetta 2 was developed by Platinum Games as the second entry in the Bayonetta series and released on the Wii U in October of 2014. This 3D action brawler features 18 replayable main story missions with massive boss battles and collectibles which can be used to purchase new techniques or equipment. Now that you have a basic idea of how each game is structured, it's time to take a look at what feminist elements are included in each one, starting with their characters and plots. We're going to start with Shantae because I feel like it. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse sees the titular hero and magical half-genie Shantae stripped of her genie powers and pitted against the evil pirate master and his minions. As the guardian of her home, Scuttletown, Shantae has to find new ways to defend its people, leading to a strange partnership with her previous nemesis, Risky Boots. Only by finding all 8 dungeons, defeating the monsters within, and retrieving all of the maps can Shantae and Risky find their way to the final island to confront the pirate master. One of the biggest feminist elements of Shantae and the Pirate's Curse is its female inclusiveness. Not only is the game led by a female hero, but she's also aided by a cast of main characters who share an almost 50-50 split when it comes to gender. On the female side, you have Shantae, Risky, Roddy Tops, and Sky, whereas on the male side, you have Uncle Mimic, Bolo, and the Pirate Master. We men do score a few extra points when it comes to side characters though. We have Ammo Baron, Branson, Squid Baron, Barracuda Joe, Abner Cadaver, Poe, Techno Baron, and Mayor Scuttlebutt. Whereas the women are underrepresented here with only Twitch, Vinegar, and the Tan Line Temple Princess. But let's be honest, the main characters matter far more. Another plus of the female main characters is they all have differing personalities and opinions. They aren't all just the same copy and pasted two-dimensional bimbos. Their characters actually have some depth and diversity. To illustrate, here's a super short description of each one. Our spunky hero Shantae is upbeat and full of energy, but also a little bit naive and shy. She's brave, but also mostly level-headed, if not a little impulsive from time to time. Risky Boots comes off as bold and brash, but is actually quite calculated in her brazenness. She's quick to temper and can be quite nasty, even showing herself to be a bit conceited at times. Sky is strong-willed and fiercely independent, maintaining a cool head and thoughtful demeanor. That is, unless her parents are around, at which time Sky becomes quite a hothead in response to her parents' never-ending quest to find Sky a suitor. Roddy Tops is easily the most laid back of the bunch, preferring to expend her energies on tricks and pranks rather than on actual adventuring. Always joking around, Roddy Tops doesn't seem like she has any buttons to be pushed, but she sure seems to like pushing the buttons of others. One trait the female characters do share, however, is their strong will and courage. These women aren't willing to be pushed around, nor are they afraid to do what it takes to defend their home. Even the series' longtime villain, Risky Boots, teams up with our heroine to help her traverse the world, as both set aside their differences. Another added bonus to all the female representation is the game easily passing the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test was originally proposed for films, and can be passed simply by having two female characters converse about something other than a male character. It sounds simple, but a surprisingly large number of films fail this one. Admittedly, Shantae and her female peers spend a decent amount of time conversing about the Pirate Master, but luckily they also regularly chat about locations, treasures, and even each other. So far, everything I've pointed out about the game will be pretty obvious to anyone who's played it, but this next point might be a bit more subjective and a bit more symbolic. I'm talking about the game's presentation of the separate struggles against the Pirate Master and the Ammo Baron to represent the struggle of women against the patriarchy. If you're not sure what the heck I'm on about, Wikipedia defines patriarchy as a social system in which males hold primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. In simplest terms, a societal patriarchy is where men run the show, and women have to be content with always being in second place. Both the Pirate Master and the Ammo Baron want to impose their male-dominated totalitarian rule over Scuttletown, the Pirate Master by conquering the world, and the Ammo Baron by directly attempting to seize the town. Once our heroine and her friends defeat these symbols of patriarchy, Scuttletown is once again free to be diverse and prosperous. I'm not sure if the creators intended to make a statement about the patriarchy specifically, or were just trying to promote equality and diversity in general, but it feels good either way. So, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse seems like the perfect example of a video game being pro-feminism, right? Well, hold your horses there, partner. Remember how I said video games have a bad reputation of objectifying women? Yeah, well, unfortunately Shantae and the Pirate's Curse is no exception. You've probably already noticed by now, but literally every single female character in this game is hypersexualized. Even the non-speaking female NPCs are dressed as belly dancers. The main characters are a little bit better, in that their costumes have some diversity, but they still seem derivative of the same belly dancer motif, making them all very revealing. The only exception to this is the Tanline Temple Princess, who seems to be wearing some kind of one-piece bathing suit to cover her midriff, which is interesting since she's also the only female character with a rotund body type. All the other female characters share similarly thin body types featuring large breasts, thin waists, and large butts/hips. Sure, they're not all identical, but they're close enough and clearly intended to be on display. I mean, just look at this character art! This is in stark contrast to the male characters, who not only have differing body types and outfits, but also differing ages, whereas all the female characters seem to be very youthful to further their sex appeal. I can almost understand the appearance of Shantae herself, since she's supposed to be a genie, and traditionally, female genies are depicted as looking like belly dancers. Okay, fine. Sometimes classic imagery does offer the most broad appeal, but why did the creators extend that motif to each and every female character in the game? I mean, look at Risky. She looks less like a pirate captain and more like a college girl wearing one of those sexy pirate Halloween costumes. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm all in favor of everyone being allowed to wear whatever in the heck they want without being discriminated against for it. That said, the choice of outfits and poses for the female characters seems like a pretty blatant attempt to objectify those characters and appeal to the male gaze. It works too. Well, except when the game indulges in some random body shaming. No, I'm not talking about the chubby Tanline Princess. She was actually proud of her appearance and had an entire society of worshippers, making her an example of body positivity. I'm actually talking about the main female characters. Yes, that's right. At several points throughout the story, the creators thought it necessary to call into question the body appearance of their own overly sexualized characters. This isn't done in a funny, self-referential way either, but is instead used as an opportunity to show the female characters being self-conscious and/or ashamed of their own bodies. The first instance of this occurs relatively early in the game, when Shantae first confronts the Ammo Baron, who fails to take the town's guardian seriously due to her appearance, assuming instead that she must be a gift from his troops. When Shantae becomes indignant, the Ammo Baron is quick to point out that Shantae is dressed in a revealing belly dancer outfit after all, to which Shantae is immediately shown being embarrassed and ashamed. Why? We never find out, as the game quickly goes back to being fun and lighthearted, throwing us into the first boss battle before we have time to think about what just happened. Then later on, while all 4 main female characters are working together in their attempt to escape from Tanline Temple, Risky suddenly feels the need to shame Sky, implying she's overweight by saying, "Blondie here does make for some excellent ballast." Sky decides to fight fire with fire by estimating that Risky's weight is probably as much as a lead balloon, or 2. I can understand Sky's rebuttal being nothing more than her defending herself. But why did the creators feel the need to make Risky randomly body shame one of the other characters? Especially since Sky looks like she's actually shorter and thinner than Risky. I know Risky is supposed to be a bit nasty and confrontational, so maybe the creators were just trying to show that she's difficult to work with. But even then, was it really necessary to resort to the tired stereotype of women getting into an argument over each other's weight? No matter which way you slice it, showing a group of thin-waisted, hourglass-shaped female characters being ashamed of their own bodies and or hypercritical of each other's bodies seems to reinforce some pretty negative concepts. So Shantae and the Pirate's Curse clearly has its flaws, the objectification of its female characters being chief among them. But you can't deny that it also exemplifies some very positive feminist concepts being implemented into a game which would otherwise only be known for its gameplay, soundtrack, and, well, character art. I'm not entirely sure why the developers went to such great lengths to put their female characters in situations where they were frequently on display, only to then turn around and body shame them? It's a bit weird. Don't worry though, because we're about to talk about a game with absolutely no body shaming. Bayonetta 2. In fact, come to think of it, Bayonetta might be the most body-confident character on a Nintendo platform. Look, let's just get this out of the way right off the bat. Bayonetta is hypersexualized for the player's enjoyment. In fact, this series indulges the idea of hypersexualization so much that it basically takes it to a whole new level. Ultra-sexualization, maybe? Needless to say, we're about to discuss and display some of the ways this mature-rated game sexually objectifies its female characters, and in this game, that includes partial nudity. So if you want to avoid that imagery, then skip ahead to 1429, or click here. Seriously, I put an age gate on the Bayonetta 2 Let's Play for a reason. Still here? Okay then, here we go. Obviously, the female characters in Bayonetta 2 are sexy. Jean? Sexy. Rosa? Sexy. The one female demon with a humanoid form? Sexy. Bayonetta? Hella sexy. Right now you're probably thinking, so what? Just because a character is sexy doesn't mean they're being objectified. That's true. But what about when literally every single aspect of a character is designed specifically to sexually appeal to the viewer? From Bayonetta's impossible figure, to her unnatural stance, to the way she walks and gestures, everything about her character is hypersexualized, and that's without even discussing her costume or attacks. For those of you who don't know the game's lore, Bayonetta is an Umbra Witch, a group of powerful warriors and magic users who draw strength from demons, which they control with their hair. But wait, Bayonetta's hair is so short, she must not be very powerful. Well, surprise, surprise, it turns out her entire costume is actually made of hair, so she has power aplenty. The only downside is that many of her attacks extend her powerful hair into the fray to damage enemies, slowly but surely revealing her semi-nude body underneath. And hey, if that wasn't overt enough for you, Bayonetta also has to go full nude each and every time she summons an infernal demon to defeat a boss-type character. Not that you'll ever need to fight a single boss to see Bayonetta nude though. The game's creators made sure to work that into the opening credit sequence. Oh, and if you were looking for something a little more kinky, this game has you covered. Bayonetta's torture attacks seem like a cross between the devices you might imagine finding in a BDSM sex dungeon and actual torture and execution devices from an actual medieval dungeon. To top it all off, the game actually has Bayonetta perform a pole dance for the player during the end credits as a reward for completing the story. All of this said, I think it's fair to say that Bayonetta is blatantly sexually objectified throughout the course of the game, and overtly so. Rather than trying to sneak it in there, the game was created to wear the sexualization on its sleeve, and be proud of it even. Much like Bayonetta herself. Believe it or not, Bayonetta's pride in her sexuality is actually what brings us to the first feminist element of the game, a strong female lead. Bayonetta clearly has no shortage of confidence, not only in her sexuality, but in all aspects of her character. In this regard, she sets a positive example for how women can be just as strong and assertive as men, if not more so. Let's start with the traditionally male-dominated field of physical combat. Bayonetta kicks ass. So much so that she doesn't even seem afraid of any of her foes, no matter how large or powerful. In fact, she frequently goes so far as to antagonize massive, boss-type enemies into fighting, just so she can have the satisfaction of defeating them. Sometimes, she's so confident in her combat capabilities that she doesn't even see the enemies as worth fighting at all, as if they're just a waste of her precious time. This isn't just for show either. Unlike the young Loki, Bayonetta has the skills to back up all that smack talk, and she seems to greatly enjoy giving her foes a demonstration of her strength. Then, there's her social strength. That's right, words have power too, and Bayonetta has both a gilded tongue and a wicked wit. One of my favorite examples of this is when Bayonetta first meets the character Loki, who decides it would be a good idea to try to insult and intimidate our heroine. It ends rather poorly for him. Bayonetta literally and figuratively shoots down Loki's aggressive behavior, while simultaneously saving him from harm. She then goes on to playfully yet condescendingly turn his silly girl insult against him, by playing into it and hamming it up as a way to avoid revealing information. A short while later, Bayonetta takes the time to give a trapped Loki a lesson in both manners and negotiating when explaining to him how he should speak to a lady. She then goes on to demonstrate that she is capable of any task and doesn't require help from anyone, before making it clear that she is not a ma'am. Bayonetta doesn't stop at playfully turning Loki's petulant quips on their ends or providing him a lesson in etiquette, though. In fact, before even meeting Loki, Bayonetta puts the powerful demon Rodan in his place when he attempts to mansplain to our heroine. It only takes Bayonetta a few seconds to inform him of his misdeeds, and yet, Rodan manages to make this same mistake a short while later. After almost becoming Swiss cheese, I doubt Rodan will tempt fate with a third strike. To be fair, I'm sure Rodan isn't the first man to receive a scolding from Bayonetta, as her attire is sure to draw some attention. Luckily, Bayonetta is quite proud of her appearance and not afraid to show it off, nor is she afraid to enforce a strict look but don't touch policy. This reinforces the concept that women should be able to wear whatever they choose without having to fear discrimination or unwanted physical contact. This is something you'd think would be common knowledge, but the necessity of the slutwalk protests in cities around the world suggests otherwise. So Bayonetta is physically powerful, socially strong, and sexually confident, all of which makes her a strong female lead. However, that could all be undone in an instance if Bayonetta is shown to be emotionally dependent on some cliché love interest. Luckily, she's anything but dependent, and while you could make inferences about her relationship with Jean, Bayonetta isn't actually shown to have any romantic interests. That doesn't prevent other characters from having romantic interests in her, though. Reporter and self-proclaimed ladies' man Luca has a tendency to show up frequently throughout Bayonetta's adventures, and while he always claims his motive is getting the next big scoop, he always manages to make time to try to impress Bayonetta. At one point, Luca tries to swing in and save Bayonetta from falling, accompanied by a wonderful slow-motion sequence featuring pink vignette and all. Of course, he actually misses Bayonetta altogether, and instead crashes into a building in a rather comical fashion. Bayonetta, on the other hand, manages to land just fine on her own, never having needed rescuing in the first place. It's an interesting role reversal from what you might expect in most games, which generally feature male protagonists sought after by female characters. Another example of this role reversal is when Bayonetta is kind enough to catch a falling Loki, who just happens to land in her arms much the way you might traditionally expect of a damsel in distress. So Bayonetta is clearly a strong, confident, independent female character, which the game actually touts from the very beginning. The opening credits even show Bayonetta using one of the most influential information brokers in the city as her personal errand boy and porter. So what about the other female characters? Well, being an Umbra witch, Jean is also shown to be strong and independent, before essentially being removed from the story for most of the game. But the female demon who captured her is shown to be the ruler of her own palace in Inferno. Yet another Umbra witch, Rosa also makes an appearance to fight alongside Bayonetta, and is easily just as strong, confident, and powerful as Bayonetta, if not more so. Then we have... well, that's it actually. All of the female characters in Bayonetta 2 are great examples of strong women as characters, But they number only 4. The male characters, on the other hand, outnumber them at 6. Enzo, Rodan, Loki, Luca, the Sage, and the Prophet, all of which have different body types and outfit styles. So despite being female-led, Bayonetta 2 still underrepresents women when compared to men. Luckily, the game still manages to pass the Bechdel test thanks to Bayonetta's conversations with Jean, the demon who captured her, and Rosa. Okay, well, I'm glad I limited myself to just these 2 games as examples because I feel like they each offered a lot more ground to cover than I expected. So, hey, how about a quick recap? At this point, it's safe to say that both Bayonetta 2 and Shantae and the Pirate's Curse objectify their female characters thanks to their ages, body types, outfits, character art, gestures, and animations. So when it comes to the question of whether or not these games commit the most common act of misogyny in gaming, sexually objectifying women, the answer is yes. But what about simultaneously being pro-feminist? Well, between the 2 of them, these games promote female-led media, female inclusiveness, female diversity and representation, passing the Bechdel test, the struggle against the patriarchy, strong female characters, physically, socially, and sexually, female independence, the idea that women should be able to wear what they like without being slut-shamed or told they're asking for it, and that women are capable of fulfilling traditionally male-dominated roles. So yes, these 2 games definitely promote some elements of feminism, either intentionally or otherwise. So you know what? I think we've achieved our objective of answering one simple question. Can a game contain elements of feminism while simultaneously objectifying its female characters? Yes, indeed. And you know what? We have 2 perfect examples right here. And if you haven't played either of these games, I highly recommend it because I think they're some of the best examples of their respective genres. If you like 2D puzzle platformers, you'll probably love Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. And if you like 3D action brawlers, you'll probably love Bayonetta 2. Just because I like these games, and I really like these games, that doesn't mean I can't be critical of them. And likewise, just because I'm critical of them, that doesn't mean I have to like them any less. Additionally, just because I am critical of something, that doesn't mean I have to come to one of 2 polarized opinions. In this case, whether or not a game is feminist or misogynist. Very rarely in life do I find that anything is actually ever that binary. On or off, 1 or 0, black or white. Usually I find most things fall somewhere within the infinite shades of grey, and usually I find that, hey, gaming is no exception. So if you ever find yourself involved in an argument online about whether or not a game happens to be feminist or misogynist, don't forget it can actually be a little bit of both. But hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know in the comments down below what your opinion is and what you thought of this video. If you're interested in watching my Let's Plays of either Shantae and the Pirate's Curse or Bayonetta 2, there'll be links for both in the end card, so don't be afraid to give those a clickety-click. But hey, in the meantime, stay in the zone. Maybe I should not have used the Infinite Shades of Grey reference. People are going to think I'm talking about 50 Shades of Grey. It's going to start a whole new argument because now everyone associates that with a sex book and... I don't know. 50 Shades of Grey didn't always refer to a sex book, guys. Back in my day, 50 Shades of Grey was a Stained album, and that's how we liked it. Yeah, Stained. That's right. When was the last time you thought about Stained? I bet. It's been a while?
And it's been a while since I said I'm sorry.